Hello, everyone. Just checking my mic was on. Hi, my name's Georgia and I'm from the Conveyancing Foundation. We've got a great webinar lined up for you today. We're going to be speaking all about stress management, what we can do to identify symptoms within ourselves and others, which isn't always obvious, how we can work back from potential burnout, and some practical tips for stress management. We're going to be joined by our guest speakers on the topic, who are Hannah Beko and Angus Lyon. And we're also going to be joined by the CEOs of our charity partners, Sarah Edmondson from Agents Together and Elizabeth Rimmer from LawCare. We will have a panel session at the end where we'll bring all of our speakers back together and we'll be answering any questions that you might have. You can pop your questions at any time in the chat box, which should be in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. It's 2 speech bubbles. If you just pop your questions in there, hopefully we'll have plenty of time to answer them at the end of the session. Just to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, so you can play it back or share it with colleagues. Ironically, there are a lot of people within the property industry who are very busy today and might not be able to attend. So we will be circulating the link to that and putting it on the website afterwards. So before we get started then, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Be Kind, We Care, who we are, what we do and how we can support you and your business. So it's a fairly recent initiative of the Conveyancing Foundation, which is a registered charity, and it aims to promote mental health and well-being within the property industry. We've teamed up with 3 charities, the Mindstep Foundation, which supports mental health research, support and awareness, LawCare, which is the mental health charity for the legal community, and Agents Together, which is the mental health charity for the estate agency sector. And what we've done is we've pulled all the excellent resources that are already available and out there together and put them in one place on our website, in our resource hub. And it's got plenty of top tips on email and time management, guides on disclosing a mental health within the workplace and promoting a mentally healthy workplace, as well as some podcasts and webinars. So please do feel free to check out our resource hub. You can also subscribe to Be Kind, We Care, where we'll be sending out some more resources that will hopefully be helpful. And you can also donate via our Be Kind, We Care Virgin Giving page. So we're trying to aim to raise some money along the way for some of the wonderful charities providing mental health initiatives, with an ultimate aim of about £30,000 within 2021. So we've got quite an ambitious fundraising target. We've already raised a few £1,000s thanks to our wonderful Be Kind, We Care sponsors. So we have a sponsorship package, which is £2,000 per year, which can be paid once or monthly. 100% of that money goes towards charity. It's all visible on the Virgin Giving page. And you can get in touch if you'd like to know more about that package. I'd like to say a huge thank you to those who have already committed their support to the initiative, who are Red Brick Solutions, Conveyancing Data Services, the Conveyancing Academy and UHY. We also will be running events throughout the year. This is our first official event, but we'll also have webinars every other month or so, targeted at helping the industry to really support mental health within the workplace. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to our charity partner, LawCare, who do some brilliant work within the legal community. So I'll pass over to you, Elizabeth, so you can tell everyone a little bit more about what you do over there at LawCare.
Great, thanks very much, Georgia, and I'm delighted to have an opportunity to tell you a little bit about LawCare. As Georgia already said, we are a charity that support and promote good mental health and well-being throughout the legal community in the UK. And that's anybody working or studying or training to be a legal professional, but also people working in other roles, paralegals, in HR, finance. So it's anybody who works in the law or is training to become a legal professional. We're here to support you. I think we've all been impacted by COVID in terms of our mental health, and I think it's really helped to elevate the understanding and awareness about mental health and why it's so important, because we've all had challenges throughout the last year. And I think we've got a great opportunity now, particularly in the legal sector, with that growing momentum around mental health, to really start thinking about what we can be doing as individuals and as legal practices and as employers to really start driving some change in the culture and practice of law, to create environments that support people's mental health, help them talk about things when they're struggling, and help them come forward for the help that's available. So at LawCare, we've got three main roles. One is around providing support. We run a telephone helpline and an email service and a confidential web chat where people can reach out who might be struggling with something that's happened that day at work, or maybe returning to work after illness, or you may have been made redundant, or you're feeling overwhelmed by the pressures of work, particularly for people in the property sector at the moment, where I know the volume of transactions has just gone through the roof due to the stamp duty holiday. And when you contact us, everybody who answers the phone or those emails or the web chats are people who've worked in the law as lawyers or in other roles. So we understand it and we get it. And we're here to provide that safe space to talk through about something that might be concerning you and help you work out what steps you may need to take to resolve what's concerning you. Another big part of what we do is around prevention and education. So we're here to provide information and resources about mental health and well-being. Everything is tailored for people working in the sector. So on our website, we've got lots of fact sheets about stress, anxiety, depression, how to talk about mental health, top tips for looking after your well-being, managing email, managing your time, how to get a good night's sleep. We've got a podcast series called The Legal Mind, which Angus Lyon, one of the speakers today, has contributed to. And Angus is also a LawCare helpline volunteer. So we've got lots of stuff on our website that you can have a look at, whether you're an individual or also a firm. And the other big part of our work really is about how we're going to drive some change in the law, how we're going to drive culture change and use the impetus of COVID to really help us drive that. So delighted to have this opportunity to give LawCare a plug. Please have a look at our website. And if you want to know more, you can sign up for our newsletter and follow us on social media. And if you are struggling with something, please reach out for help, because we're here to provide that and to help you move forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you to LawCare for all the brilliant work that you're doing and the support that you're providing to everyone in the legal community. I'm now going to pass over to Sarah Edmondson, who is the CEO of Agents Together, and they provide mental health resources in the estate agency sector. Be Kind We Care is very much about encompassing everyone within the property industry. That includes estate agents and lenders. So Sarah, if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about what Agents Together do.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for allowing me to come on today and tell you a little bit about Agents Together. There's no doubt it has been one of the most stressful times for estate agents and those lawyers who are supporting them in getting those transactions across the line. And one of the things that I really care passionately about is making sure that we can work more harmoniously together. Easy for me to say. And that's why this initiative, this Be Kind We Care initiative, is so fantastic, because it is the bringing together of the property industry rather than the two sectors. We have to work together as one. Over at Agents Together, just a little bit about what we do. I won't take up too much of your time because there's some very interesting speakers. But in a nutshell, we're not even a year old. We started the foundation, myself and a group of other wonderful people across the estate agency side of things. And around about June, I think we launched last year. It feels like a lifetime ago, but it was June. And we have two pillars. That is that we have a healthy mind and a healthy business. And that is what we are promoting across the estate agency industry, but also the whole property sector. And with that in mind, we have launched a number of initiatives in the relatively short space of time that we've been going, one of which is our hugely successful mentorship scheme. with the idea that nobody should feel alone and everybody should have the opportunity to have somebody to talk to. That has been incredibly well received, and there's now over 2,000 hours a month of mentoring going on with volunteer mentors and mentees who are loving and thriving off the back of this information they're being given from their mentors. So it's a really worthwhile initiative that we've done there. Likewise, we also have a lot like Elizabeth, we provide an awful lot of resources for the industry. We have Winning Ways videos, which is all about how you can improve your performance, your mindset and well-being in the workplace. We have working groups who are working towards getting a better understanding of well-being in the workplace, and then also raising awareness. But ultimately, our ultimate goal is to drive change, a lot like Elizabeth said. We are going to help the industry to be further educated on how we can still perform, but we can really look after the well-being of ourselves, our employees and everyone around us. So I'm delighted to be here today, and thank you, Georgia, for doing such a wonderful job of organising this. I'm really looking forward to listening to what Angus and Hannah have got to say as well. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah. And it's so great to have you on board and really span across the property sector with what we're trying to do with the mental health side of things. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you on to Angus Lyon, who is our first speaker of today. Angus is a trained psychologist, but is also a former lawyer for 30 years. He's the author of A Lawyer's Guide to Wellbeing and Managing Stress. So he's very well placed to speak on this topic. As Elizabeth mentioned, Angus is also a LawCare volunteer. So Angus is going to be talking to us a little bit about burnout and what we can do to work back from a potential burnout at work. So over to you, Angus. I'm just going to pop your slides on now.
Great, thanks, Georgia. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And as people have said, I'm Angus. I used to be a lawyer and I'm now a counsellor. I've titled my talk Beating Burnout, but on reflection, that seems a bit energetic. Maybe I should have called it Sidestepping Burnout. That feels a bit more appropriate. So what I'd like you to do is forget about taking detailed notes, forget about your busy morning, forget about what's lined up this afternoon. Just take a few minutes to reflect on how things apply to you now. And maybe jot down one or two things as well. Next slide, please. Hey, I'm doing my Chris Whitty bit here. I've not done this before, and it feels a little bit like one of those former Downing Street press briefings. But I don't have, well, I was going to say I don't have any boring graphs, but I do have one pie chart. So look out for that. First, the problem. Most of us have been home working now for as long as we can remember. Flick back, please. Earlier slide, fun slide. Thank you very much. It works very well. Or as a friend of mine put it, living at work, plate spinning and homeschooling, revising business plans and budgets, supervising staff or being supervised at a distance, having no clear boundaries between work and leisure, and dealing with the extended stamp duty holiday, and adjusting and readjusting to whatever your definition of the new normal is. None of us have been exempt from COVID and its effects. Being ill, losing loved ones, experiencing the huge demands of lockdown and its consequences, both in personal and professional lives. Things haven't been easy. Next slide, please. Now, a little bit of theory. The demands of professional life, which can be extreme at the best of times, have simply multiplied for most of us over the last year, and the risks of burnout have multiplied too. Is this something we have to live with, or can we take steps to make the pressures more manageable, clarify things, and take better control? And the plot spoiler is yes to all of the above. Let's wind back a decade or two to 2008. Recognizing that a worker's experience of strain played a role in the relationship between external job demands, aka stressors, and work-related outcomes, such as absenteeism or illness, burnout researchers Christina Maslach and Michael Leiter in the United States and Canada published a paper proposing a burnout engagement model. Drawing on 3 decades of research, they pictured people's psychological relationships to their jobs as a continuum between a negative experience of burnout at one end and a positive experience of engagement at the other. They defined engagement, as an energetic state of involvement with personally fulfilling activities that enhance one's sense of personal efficacy. A lot of long words there. And then 2 years ago, the World Health Organization adopted Maslach's formulation of burnout as a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed and is characterized by 3 dimensions: feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job, and reduced personal efficacy. Okay, that's a bit of theory out the way. Some of this is quite heavy stuff, lots of long words, but I'm just outlining some of this so that we get a sense of what people really mean and have been researching over the last 40 years or so when looking at burnout. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Peter. Peter is a litigation lawyer, and with his agreement, I've anonymized his story and changed his name. But the principles of what he went through will apply to all professionals. His problems started before COVID. Looking back, it was my year from hell. Peter, a partner in a large law firm, was reflecting on a period of about 9 months when everything seemed to go wrong. He had unexpectedly lost a key member of his department. He was unable to recruit a replacement, and his workload virtually doubled for several months. His wife had been unwell and his father had died around the same time. He was able to hold things together for a while, but his sense of connection with his colleagues and clients seemed to evaporate, and the increase in work and additional responsibility gradually overloaded him. Alcohol intake increased. He was ashamed that he occasionally had thoughts about ending it all. He consulted his doctor, who diagnosed clinical depression, prescribed medication, and referred him for therapy. Next slide, please. Maslach and Leiter described the aspects of the burnout engagement model as operating within 6 key domains of the workplace environment: workload, control, reward, community, fairness, and values. We'll look very briefly at these 6 areas. Workload. Sometimes job demands can exceed human limits and resources to fulfill the requirements. Control. A sense of personal control in the workplace is vital. Reward. Insufficient reward, whether financial or institutional or social, increases people's vulnerability to burnout. Community. The overall quality of social interaction at work is key. This includes issues of conflict, mutual support, closeness, and the capacity to work as a team. Fairness. It's important that decisions affecting the workforce are perceived as being fair and equitable. And values. The aspirations that originally attracted people to their jobs need to be nurtured. They're the motivating connection between the worker and the workplace. And we don't need to be the sharpest professional in the world to see how these 6 areas will be affected profoundly by the addition of the experience and pressures of COVID. And you'll see the pie chart in the picture doesn't have equal sections. We will each be affected differently by these 6 factors. If we think about Peter, I guess he was mainly affected by huge increase in workload. Clearly I think that would have been his top concern. His sense of control over what was happening in his life and his personal family life, and in the way things were happening at work. Reward, yeah, I think he was getting enough money, so that wasn't a big deal. Community, I think he became somewhat detached from his family, somewhat detached from people at work, so he went into a bit of a bubble. Fairness and values, yeah, they'd have been there in the background, but those I don't think were the main concerns for him. Let's just pause for a second. Have a think about which of these factors might have been most significant for you in the last few months. Which are causing you most pressure at the moment? Just have a think about that and maybe jot a couple of words down if that's helpful. Okay, next slide, please. A guy called Herbert Freudenberger, fantastic name, who originally coined the term burnout as we use it today back in the 70s, and his colleague Gail North outlined 12 stages of burnout in the mid-1980s. The stages can be seen as different factors in our experience. They're not necessarily sequential, but for many form a recognizable pattern. I found it helpful to visualize the stages as hours on a clock face. The alarm clock in the picture is there on purpose. These factors can act as a wake-up call. And I run through them briefly. I would just interject with a little bit of a health warning as we get nearer the 10 and 11 and 12. A number of, thankfully few, but I've known people who've taken their lives, partly as a result of burnout, partly for other reasons. So if you've been personally affected by severe mental illness yourself or in your family, then I just throw in a little bit of a health warning here, because some of these factors might feel quite close to the mark. Okay, these are the 12 stages. Firstly, a compulsion to prove ourselves. Most of us start our careers with ambition. This can turn into determination and compulsion when the pressures increase. Pressure to hit billing targets and hours worked often start on day one. And then we need to keep up with peers and not be outperformed. At 2 o'clock, working harder. We then need to maintain targets and put in long hours. This can lead to an obsession with autonomy and independence. Some of us develop a notion of our own irreplaceability. Sometimes this can lead to trying to fit into an organization that we begin to sense doesn't suit us. 3 o'clock, neglecting our needs. With most of our energy devoted to work, often little time is left for relaxation and recreation. Relationships can begin to suffer and sleep is lost. Initially, this can seem like a necessity and an altruistic commitment to our career or organization. Sometimes it can actually feel exciting to feel like a martyr. 4 o'clock, displacement of conflicts. A vague sense of unease can develop, a sense that something isn't quite right. But at this point, it feels easier to try to cope with the pressures rather than to think about the underlying anxieties. Often around this time, physical symptoms can begin to present themselves. Fifth, revision of values. Isolation, avoidance of conflict, and a denial of basic physical needs can change our perceptions. Personal values are revised and one's standard of evaluating self-worth is transferred to work status and achievement. This can lead to emotional blunting. 6, a denial of emerging problems. Others now begin to notice but tolerate behavioral changes such as negativity, irritability, and self-preoccupation. We may become less sociable or aggressive or sarcastic. We can begin to acknowledge the pressures but attribute them to work demands rather than to the way that we've adapted to cope with the cultural expectations of the workplace. 7 o'clock, withdrawal. Some become withdrawn and socially isolated. Social contact is reduced to a minimum. We can feel increasingly without hope or direction. It's easy at this point to turn to alcohol or drugs or other potential addictions. 8 o'clock, obvious behavioural changes. Gradually, colleagues and clients and family are unable to overlook the behavioural changes. Fellow workers may talk behind backs about colleagues, and clients may make formal complaints. Conflict in the workplace and at home can become the norm. 9, depersonalization. We no longer see ourselves or others as valuable and no longer acknowledge our own needs. All that matters is what's happening at the moment. Past and future are forgotten. Living can turn into a series of mechanical functions. Next, inner emptiness. We can start to experience a sense of inner emptiness and may use food or drugs or alcohol or sex or gambling to fill the void. Leisure time can begin to feel like dead time. 11 o'clock, depression. Burnout commonly overlaps with clinical depression. We begin to feel exhausted, hopeless and indifferent. It may seem like life has no meaning. And then at 12 o'clock, burnout itself. At this point, suicidal ideation is common. Sometimes it is acted out. Immediate medical attention is required following mental and physical collapse. Now, let's take a breather. Some of that is pretty heavy stuff. Let's go back to Peter. Peter's experience mirrors the 12 steps pretty closely. Maybe if he'd been more aware of how things were deteriorating, he could have been more proactive in sidestepping the decline. But sometimes it's so hard to do this when work is so full on, not seeing the wood for the trees and waking up to yet another Groundhog Day. Thinking back on his burnout experience, Peter acknowledged that things would have gone downhill far more rapidly in lockdown with the sudden unplanned increase in responsibility, the need to reorganize staff, workload, supervision, working practices, and the unfamiliar disconnection in communicating remotely with partners and staff and clients and courts. And reflecting on things now, as lockdown begins to ease in his area, he began to feel exhausted at the thought of working practices having to be readapted and yet more uncertainty. And what about us? Do we see any of these traits in ourselves? Is there anything we could be taking more notice about? Because there are steps that we can take to wind back the clock. Next slide, please. I'll go through this very quickly because time's rattling on. There are a number of things here, proactive steps that we can take, which are really the reverse of the progression towards burnout. Accepting the warning signs of stress, stop denying what's going on. Next, being proactive in keeping social ties alive. Changing our circumstances if the job or other circumstances are dragging us under, looking at other options. Identifying work aspects which are the most demanding and working to change things as much as possible. Stop taking on other people's problems. Learning to say no. Declining additional requests on our time and energy. Learning to delegate. Reassessing stuff, thinking through what's most important and acting on that. Learning to pace ourselves. Taking care of our bodies, which is all the obvious stuff. Exercising and sleeping and eating well. Diminishing worry and anxiety. Hollow laugh there maybe, but as much as possible anyway. taking time to play, and where we can, having fun. Hannah's going to be looking at those in a little bit more detail in a couple of minutes. Next slide, please. If a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, of what then is an empty desk a sign? The point here is, let's be real about things. There's no such thing as a stress-free life. Sometimes we can pick and choose and avoid unnecessary demands, but usually it's not so much about escaping the pressures, but learning to cope better and to sidestep the dangers. Next slide, please. As I said, no need to take notes for the talk. Georgia will email out an article I wrote recently about lawyer burnout, which includes most of the pointers we've just looked at. But they're equally applicable to all professionals, whether we're estate agents, IFAs, lawyers, surveyors, medics, teachers, and. Maybe there's lots of questions raised, and if there are, pop them in the chat box and we can look at them later. Okay, back to you, Georgia.
Thank you so much, Angus. That was really, really interesting. I think part of the difficulty sometimes is recognizing that burnout within yourself and within others, and realize that you're kind of heading down that path, because some of those things you think, oh yeah, actually that was me. I feel like that. And you're kind of ticking them off. So I think that was really, really interesting. Thank you. And now I'm going to pass over to Hannah Beko, who is going to take that a little bit further and talk about some practical steps that we can implement to reduce the stress within our lives. Just to tell you a little bit about Hannah. So Hannah is a practicing lawyer. She's a real estate partner, and she's also a coach and trainer to the legal profession. She founded Authentically Speaking in 2016 and coaches on stress management, improving emotional well-being, and having authentic conversations. So welcome, Hannah. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're looking forward to hearing more about what you have to say on stress management. I'm just going to get your slides up now.
Oh, thank you, Georgia. Hope you can hear me okay. Yeah, I was a little ago, but it's all fine now. Oh, well, hello, everybody. And goodness, listening to Angus's presentation there on burnout, it's and I think that the point Georgia made, about being aware of it, and it's the same with stress, and we'll talk about that now. It's just being aware of the slippery slope, I suppose, and of the things that start to happen to us that sometimes go unnoticed at first in ourselves and in others. And in actual fact, what a perfect segue into this first slide. So although I am, very much wanting to give you practical tools today about dealing with stress, because, that's what I, sort of stand for with people. But what I do like to start with, as if sort of Angus's presentation wasn't enough, which I'm sure it was, is why should you take these steps? Because, clearly it's not simple. It's not a simple thing to manage our stress and reduce our chances of burnout. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it and it wouldn't be the huge issue that it is, particularly in our profession. So I do like to just start with almost sort of setting the scene a little bit as a plea, if you like, or an encouragement to think about taking up some of the practical steps that I'm going to talk to you about towards the end. So first of all, you may be very, very aware of these. Maybe I'm being overly obvious here, but just in case there are symptoms of stress that are creeping up on you and maybe you're not so aware of, then perhaps this little slide will help. So symptoms of stress, one of the top symptoms that I see with the lawyer clients that I work with, and it's my own, it's my barometer, if you like, of knowing when my stress levels are increasing, and that's sleep issues. So that might be getting to sleep in the first place, or most commonly it's that waking up at 2-3 o'clock in the morning and worrying and running over cases and thinking about what you've forgotten to do or what you need to do. I had a client who said to me that she could run through a whole case in the night. She'd wake up 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and she'd be running through the whole matter in her head, looking for what she'd done wrong, what she'd missed. And obviously that's not only impacting sleep, which is so important, as Angus has already highlighted. But also, of course, it's increasing stress levels because you're worrying about that. So sleep issues is one of, I think, the first symptoms you might notice when your stress levels are increasing. The next one there is lack of patience, being irritable, mood swings, those sorts of things. Now, obviously, people around you may become aware of those things, or you may see this in others, because, just as, the theme behind the session today, be kind, we care. This is also, about caring for ourselves, definitely, but also about caring for those around us in our profession and our teams that we work in, and looking out for some of these signs of where people might need some more support. So, something like irritability or mood swings, if they're not common for that person, then they might be a little bit of a warning, to look into how that person is. Memory issues. Now, this is an interesting one. I remember someone saying to me years ago that she went to her doctors thinking that she had early onset Alzheimer's or dementia, because her memory had gone from being really quite good to awful. And it turned out it was just stress. Thank goodness it wasn't Alzheimer's or dementia, but it was high and chronic stress levels that was impacting her memory. Concentration and loss of focus. And I think this is a vital one really for us, because I know even taking time out of what I know is a very, beyond busy, it's hectic, it's crazy, it's all those words, time at the moment in the conveyancing profession, taking time out to even come to this session, and then taking time out, I hope, to put into practice some of the steps I'm going to talk to you about today. It does take time, and you've got to weigh that up against your caseload and what you have to do. And these are a couple of reasons why it's so important, because if rising stress levels are impacting your concentration and your focus, then you're not getting through as much work as you possibly could be doing if your stress levels were lower. So it's not just that it's making you feel bad, but it is, of course, impacting the amount of work that you're able to get through. And the next point on procrastination is very, very similar. When we're procrastinating, it is a symptom of stress. It absolutely is. We're looking at the work in front of us and we just don't know where to start. We don't know which matter to go to next. We're looking at a matter trying to decide, do we need to raise inquiries on this? Are we ready to, report to the client, etc.? And we just can't make a decision. We can't sign off on it. It's like that. You've done a report on title and you just keep going back to it and keep going back to it because you think there's something you've missed or more that needs to go in there. And so that being stuck, in coaching, we can call it analysis paralysis. It's just being stuck in looking at everything around us and not able to move forward. So obviously that impacts our work and how much work we can get through. And again, a symptom of stress. And then I've just popped this one on the bottom of the slide, this idea that things that are out of character for us might happen. So for me, a few years ago, when I was in the sort of chronic stress state, it was things like reversing into stationary objects in the car. It happened 2 or 3 times in 1 year. Going through a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit right outside my house that I drove through every day, going through there at 35, because I was not focusing on what I was doing. I was too in my head. I was thinking about all the things I needed to do that day, in all of those occasions, all the times I reversed into something and when I went through the speed camera, and I wasn't focused. And I have to say, by the time I sort of hit the 3rd stationary object, I did really question if I ought to be driving, because clearly, driving is something that takes a lot of attention and focus, and you've got to be on the ball with it, of course. I'm driving my children to school and back. And so it really was a point where I thought, you've got to look at this. You clearly have got too much going on and too much on your mind, and you're not giving, something like driving the proper attention. So it may not be that, but something else that is out of character, not like you, or again, in someone that you work with or someone that you know, if you see things that are out of character for them, then all these are symptoms of stress that you want to have a look at. So why is the legal profession so prone to stress? Because even before COVID, we topped the charts in terms of stressful professions, even above the armed forces, the emergency services, people who put their lives at risk. The legal profession has higher levels of stress than that even. Now that's pre-COVID. I'm sure that our, poor NHS and healthcare providers have way exceeded that this year. But why is the legal profession so highly prone to stress. If I could have the next slide, please, Georgia. And this is a way that I like to explain it, and I hope you like my little images there. One way to look at this is that we have this inner superhero. You may never have thought of yourself as a superhero before, but maybe some of these things resonate with you. You know, do you often feel tired and exhausted? I know that goes back to Angus's slides about burnout. Do you feel that you're not all that fulfilled? Again, one of the steps on the path to burnout. You don't like saying no. And I've actually crossed through some of that and said, you don't actually say no. So you don't say no at all. You say yes all the time. You've probably worked very hard to be where you are now. You've worked long hours. You don't have as much time with your family as you'd like. That gets sacrificed for what you need to do for work. And you pick up the slack if someone else doesn't pull the weight. So again, it's always saying yes and never saying no. So this is this idea of our inner superhero. You know, we are the people pleaser. We are the yes person. You know, we're always going the extra mile for the clients. You know, clients' expectations have, well, you know, gone crazy over the last year, and they've always been pretty high. And so being able to push back on that is one of the, you know, the fundamental things that we need to look at doing to manage our stress levels. But this inner superhero finds that very difficult, and I think that's why we end up with such high levels of stress in the profession, because the superhero does it all, you know. And as I say, you may not feel like a hero at all, but it's this trying to be everything to everyone, trying to be the people pleaser, the yes person, the one who picks up everything, the one who doesn't delegate. You know, I can't give anything to anyone else, because what if they don't do it as well as me? Or what if they take longer? Or what if they're not as good with the client as I am? You know, I must do it myself. I must keep it all under my control. So it's these sorts of traits that, you know, really don't help us in our profession in terms of our high stress levels. So Georgia, if you wouldn't mind the next slide. So what I wanted to share with you is a little bit about the science behind stress. I mean, I personally find this fascinating, but also I saw it in myself. You know, now that I know about chronic stress, I can see how I used to react in this situation under chronic stress. And so, you know, it's, I'm sure you've probably all heard of the fight or flight response, you know, why the stress response was created in our bodies back when we were cave people times, because we saw the threat, the lions, the tigers, the attacking tribes, and our bodies needed to react to that. We needed to run or we needed to fight. So the body would release adrenaline first, and then it would release cortisol, and that cortisol, the stress hormone, would increase our heart rate, increase our blood pressure, so that we could run or fight. Now, if you can imagine that stress reaction, and I've shared this story quite a number of times, and I don't seem to be alone, the chronic stress reaction I used to get 5 or 6 years ago was I would get an email or a phone call that said, Hannah, get in touch with me urgently, from the client. And because of the stress I was under, and the, you know, the effect that had on my brain that I'm going to mention in a moment, I would go straight from seeing that email or that phone call along this thought process that was, I've made a mistake, I've done something wrong, I'm going to lose the client, I'm going to lose all my work, I'm going to lose my house. You know, that was the catastrophic thinking that was starting to go on because of chronic stress that I was under. Because what happens is, once you've got all this cortisol in your body, it starts to, the brain is growing and changing all the time. And it actually was creating new neural connections in my brain that were going down this stress pathway, if you like. So it was this seeing the email or the phone call straight to I've lost my house. And that was happening, you know, really quickly. It's that feeling of hairs go up on the back of your neck, your blood runs cold. You actually can't think straight anymore, because this stress reaction has an impact on your prefrontal cortex, which is your decision-making part of your brain, your rational thinking. So whereas now that I'm not in that place of chronic stress, you know, I can get the phone call or the email that says contact me urgently. And now instead of, oh my goodness, I've lost my house, it is literally, look at the time, can I get back to them now, or am I about to go into another meeting or have to do something else, in which case I'll have to get back to them later, which, you know, I'm sure you'd agree is a much more normal reaction to have. But because I was in chronic stress, these neural pathways in my brain were doing this catastrophic thinking, if you like, which was straight from email, to I've lost everything, it's a disaster, all of those sorts of thinking that, might resonate with you in certain circumstances. So what the hormone cortisol does is, as I say, it increases that part of our brain that deals with fear and anxiety. So it really is, it really is bad for us. And it also decreases that part of our brain that deals with learning, memory, and stress control, ironically. So that's why you would have struggle to focus, struggle to concentrate, struggle to learn new things, retain information, memory, I've mentioned already. That's why that happens, because the hormone cortisol has a negative impact on that part of the brain. And then, as I've mentioned, it also has a negative impact on this prefrontal cortex part of our brain, rational, logical thinking, the part of our brain that if it stayed in control, then it would say, no, that catastrophic thinking, that's not true. It would analyze the situation properly and say, no, that's not the case. But when we're in chronic stress, that just doesn't happen. So that's, I do like to share that with people so that, if you do experience that stress reaction, you're aware of what's happening. But again, as I sort of said right at the outset, the reason I share that is because, if you understand what's happening to you when you're in stress, then hopefully when I talk about some of the steps you can take to deal with it, you will see sort of why you need to do that and why it's important. If we could just nip to the next slide, Georgia, please. Now, this is something that I've been talking about with some of my clients a lot this week. You may have seen this before, this mental iceberg image, which I believe is something that Freud came up with. So what you've got here is your conscious mind, so your thoughts, the bit you're aware of, is at the top of the iceberg there. But the vast majority of your mind, if you like, of your brain, is going on underneath there in the subconscious part of your mind. Now, the reason this is important is that your conscious mind makes up 10% of your total brain function. Okay, so what you're aware of and your thoughts make up 10%, but your subconscious mind, or your unintentional, if you like, you're not thinking about these things, it's not intentionally happening. That part of your brain represents 90% of your total brain function. So actually, it's impacting us and how we react to things, how we respond to things, so much more than we perhaps realize. We think it's just our thoughts that are impacting the way we feel, but believe it or not, we can take some control of our thoughts as well, and I've got a slide on that in a moment. But what we're really being driven by, or 90% of our brain is being driven by, in a way that unless we stop and think about these things, we're not aware of. But hopefully, after today's session, you'll certainly get some awareness of, is things like, so what is this subconscious mind involved with? It's things like our beliefs, the things we grew up with, and that's where this superhero idea comes in, because we might have grown up with, you should always work hard, you should always do your best, you don't want to let anybody down, I can't forget the exact saying, but nothing in life comes for free. If it's worth having, it's not easy. All these beliefs that we may have grown up around, whether it's in our home and the way we were brought up, or whether it's in culture around us and social culture around us. These beliefs that money doesn't grow on trees, you must work really hard, all that sort of thing keeps that inner superhero driven, if you like. Our emotions, and this is emotions that we recognize and we know about, and the emotions that we stuff down. Maybe we don't even realize they're coming up anymore because we've become so good at stuffing those emotions down. And I'm sure that would resonate with what Angus was talking about, with what can happen with burnout. Often people do not necessarily see it coming. There is so much pushing down of emotions, pushing down of the fact that they're exhausted, they're frustrated, they're becoming resentful, all those sorts of things, and they're just stuffed down and they just carry on. Habits, so the things that we do every day, now obviously we want to be bringing in more healthy habits, and I'm going to talk about some of those as positive steps that you can take. But we also have our negative habits as well, and that can be things like, do we speak negatively about ourselves or about how we feel? And I've got a slide on that as well. Values are things like what's important to us, what is important to us in our life. Now, protective scripts, this is an interesting one. Again, this is about the sort of pathways, if you like, in our mind. What is our mind telling us? I talk about mind chatter a lot, because when we're trying to do our work or get through our day, we've got enough on our plate as it is. But when we've got the mind chattering at us as well, oh, did you order that birthday card? Did you pay that credit card bill? Did you get that food order sorted? Did you wash the school uniforms? All this is going on as well. I'm sure that resonates with you. So you're trying to do your work, but you're batting away all these things that are going on as well. So protective scripts are sort of, what is the mind telling us, and is the mind telling us, oh, this work is too stressful? The mind always wants to protect us, and it's trying to do its best for us. But actually, we can take some control back of that, and change some of that script that's going on. And I've got a slide or two I'm going to share with you in a moment. And then finally on there, I've put intuition or gut instinct, and how often, as rational, logical thinking people that we think we are in the legal profession, how often do we actually stop and listen to our intuition or our gut instinct? And I would encourage people to actually start listening to that far more than we do. So I hope that was interesting for people, and you can see how some of our decisions are reached and some of our actions are driven by things that we weren't necessarily even aware of. But hopefully after today, you're a little bit more aware of them. Georgia, can you pop to our next slide? Thank you. So positive language, I mentioned about retraining these pathways in the brain, which is what this in the next slide is about. And this is an exercise I did with myself 5 or 6 years ago. Whenever people asked how I was, if I was dropping my children off at school, how are you? Oh, I'm so busy. Oh, it's so hectic. Oh, it's manic. All these things I was telling myself, all busy and stressed was creating was more busy and stressed. So one top tip I advise people to do, and there is a little bit of fake it till you make it with this, I have to be honest, is stop using that language. Stop using that language internally and externally. Now, I'm not saying turn it into this wonderful positive thing that it's not. You're not going to go suddenly to start saying everything's wonderful, but think of the words that you're using a lot. And do you really want to feel like that? And I suspect you don't. You don't want to feel busy and stressed. So try to stop using that language and think about what language you might be able to use instead. And believe it or not, it really does have an impact on how you feel. And it also is contagious. So if you start using that slightly more positive language yourself, then other people will pick up on that as well. Georgia, next slide, please. So positive thinking, I'm sure this is probably pretty obvious. What's beneficial about it? Apparently we have a longer lifespan, of course, reduced stress, which would be fantastic, lower rates of depression, increased resistance to the common cold, and therefore, potentially maybe COVID as well. Better coping skills, more resilience, increased physical well-being and psychological health. So it's certainly worth, as tip sort of one, how could you start thinking more positively, and just change some of that inner language that you're using with yourself. First step is to catch yourself doing it. Catch yourself, see what language you're using every day, both outwardly and inwardly, and see what you could swap that for. Next slide, please, Georgia. So controlling our negative thoughts, and this is just a little exercise you might like to try. You might see this called things like cycle of creation, cycle of thought creation, but it's just something to consider that often we can be triggered into thinking negatively. And again, this is about sort of wrestling some control back from our mind instead of letting our mind control us. So the first step on this it's actually a cycle. If you have a look at it, you can Google it. So an event happens or a situation occurs. So in my case, it was the email or the phone call that said, Hannah, get in touch urgently. That was the event. Now I attach some meaning to that event, which to me was I'd done something wrong. I'd got something wrong. So then my feelings in response to that were panic and fear. And then my actions were to freeze, as I say, blood run cold, hair goes up at the back of your neck, etc. I was just frozen. And of course, my stress levels had just been hugely elevated. Now, imagine now the same situation happens. So the situation or the event is what I'm trying to say here is the situation or the event doesn't matter what that is. What matters is our feelings and our reaction to it. And we can take some control back over that. So instead, when something happens like the same situation, I might attach a different meaning to it, which would be, oh, the client needs to speak to me. And no more than that, just the client needs to speak to me. So my feelings are, well, I need to get back to them, but can I do it now? Or do I need to do it after my next meeting? And then my action is very different. And of course, the physical reaction that it has on my body and on my stress levels is very different as well. So what an exercise you can try here is just to notice if you are, if you do experience that extreme stress response, have a look at what triggered it. This is what we call sort of trigger events. What's triggered it? What's caused you to move into that state? And just even realizing that means that the next time maybe you can look at it and say, have I sort of created some meaning to that event that isn't the case? And actually, let's put this rational thinking part of the brain back in charge and see how we could deal with it differently. Next slide, please, Georgia. Thank you very much. So what can you do? And I've hinted at a few things here already that you can try. This idea of changing our thinking patterns. So changing that language from negative to positive. Also having a look at what might trigger you into feeling stressed and see what meaning you're creating. That's the subconscious mind again. It's all those beliefs, values, all those things are creating a meaning. And actually we can take more control of that than we think we can. And some ways that can help you take more control of that and be more aware of how you're being affected by your subconscious mind are these things. So journaling is very powerful, just dumping everything out. I know a sleep expert friend of mine says she recommends people have a worry time. Just sit and write down everything that's on your mind, dump it out onto a piece of paper. That can be a very powerful exercise to try. Practicing gratitude is an amazing practice to get into and very quick. You just think of 3 things you're grateful for from that day before you go to bed. It does have a physical impact on the heart. There's some great studies that people who were in heart disease stage, if they kept a gratitude diary, they were then less likely to move into heart failure. So there is a lot of science behind a practice of gratitude, and it's a very simple one to pick up. Meditation is always one of my top tips. Meditation actually reverses that cycle that I showed you about the science behind stress. So a regular meditation practice will actually help you to reduce that fear and anxiety center again and increase your learning, memory and stress control functions, and put that prefrontal cortex back in charge. So meditation is a huge one. Affirmations is again about retraining that brain, changing our thinking patterns. So it's saying something positive. So, I would use that as part of my meditation personally. And I would use something like, I am calm, I am peaceful, I am happy, whatever it is that you want to feel. And you put it into the positive tense. So I am, and the thing you want to feel. And you just keep repeating that to yourself. Might sound silly, but we're retraining that brain. We're taking control of the brain instead of it sort of controlling us. Morning routine is always a top tip of mine. How you start your day is how the day is going to go. And I think taking control of it instead of feeling like it's running you and you're, running to catch up. Personally, I find it makes all the difference. So just saying to yourself, this is how I'm going to start my day, hopefully not by looking at your phone straight away. And it doesn't have to be a lot of things. It could be 10, 15 or 20 minutes, and it can be worked around children. I've got 3 children. So, over the years, I've had to work this around them as well. There's always a way, as one of my friends likes to say. So, maybe your morning routine is a bit of meditation, a bit of journaling, doing a bit of exercise, reading 2 pages of a good positive positive book is always good, and I've put some of my favourite suggestions there. Even listening to a positive video on YouTube, there's tons of positive morning motivation videos on YouTube, so there's a lot you can find there. So I hope that some of those were useful, and as always, I'm very happy to take any questions on any of those. Thank you, Georgia.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That was really interesting and great to have some real practical tips that I guess we can all implement in our own lives moving forward for reducing that stress. We're going to be bringing back all of our speakers now for the Q&A session. So if you've got a question, please just pop it in the chat box. I've got one to perhaps get us started, Hannah. Obviously, those practical tips are really, really helpful for what we can do in our own lives. But what would you suggest for somebody perhaps maybe in a HR position or a managerial position? What could they do to help reduce the stress of their teams? I mean, is there any way we can kind of bring those tips into the workplace? How would that look? How could we do that?
Well, my biggest tip at the moment, and it's what I've seen work with my clients over the last year, is talking about it, just talking about it. So bringing people together, you can do it on Zoom at the moment still, just in small groups, and just having people talk openly about how they feel. Because I think the first step is understanding that they're not alone. It still surprises me after 5 years of doing it, that you get somebody new who comes and joins and says, oh my goodness, I thought I was the only one who felt like I can't cope, that I'm a failure, that, is crying in the night and can't sleep. I thought I was alone. And so to just not realize you're alone is so powerful. So I think, anything can start with a discussion group, and it's free. It's free. You can just bring people together and talk about it more, and then make some of these tips available to people, But I think it's very easy to make tips available. But what I hope people saw is I like to talk them through why they work, because we're lawyers. If I'd have just started talking about meditation and gratitude, for a lot of people, it'd be like, oh yeah, I've heard that before. But I got into it because of the science. Go to the science, explain to people about why this stuff works, and then hopefully it will be received better. Does that help? Yeah,
thank you so much. I guess kind of linked to that, we've had a question from one of the attendees, is how do we better engage senior management who may be stuck in their ways after years of practice to support junior staff and improve workplaces at the root? I don't know whether anyone else wants to jump in on that, but I think that's a really interesting question as well. Hopefully we do see a change, kind of like a shift as the young professionals come through towards kind of mental well-being in the workplace.
Elizabeth, come on. I was thinking. I've been having so many conversations recently about working as a therapist, working on the LawCare helpline, just talking to so many people who are affected by the workplace environment and poor workplace health and safety and environment, and it's the nature of the work, inadequate supervision in a lot of cases, people being treated as money-making widgets and parts of a cog of a machine. So my thinking now, yes, it's absolutely essential that we work with people who have been damaged by bad workplace practices. But it is, I think you've hit it on the nail, Georgia, nail on the head, it's a cultural thing. And yes, in time, other people, younger people will, in 20 years' time, will be in control be running businesses, and they will be more minded to champion well-being in the workplace, to set a good example, to get behind, to support, to look after people, as well as the profits and productivity. But it is, I think the challenge now is so much a cultural thing, and I'm talking specifically about the legal profession. Yeah, things are changing, but Elizabeth, go on.
Well, I was
on your soapbox.
My soapbox. I think it's a really good question, because I think that is a challenge that we face, that senior leaders in the law perhaps aren't as engaged as they ought to be in this agenda. And I think it's helping people see that in your law firm, your greatest asset are your people. Your legal work is done in people's minds, and looking after the minds of your staff should be a top priority for you for all those reasons that we know and all the things we've been talking about in this webinar. And so I think that from a business case point of view, there's a reputational risk to your firm when staff have poor mental health. I don't know if anybody saw the Gazette yesterday about a managing partner at Freeth's who's been to an employment tribunal case because he was burnt out, and the firm had been found wanting for their support of him. It's all over the Gazette today. Go and have a look at it. Freeth's is the top 50 law firm in the country. So that kind of stuff, nobody wants to see that. But not only for that, that kind of thing shouldn't be happening. We've seen lots of cases around junior lawyers making mistakes and covering them up, again related to toxic workplaces in the law. With better supervision and support, those kinds of things shouldn't be happening. And I think it's about trying to help people see that it's not only about being nice to people and doing the right thing. It makes business sense to be looking after people's mental health. It's about recruitment, retention. COVID's been seismic. The world of work has changed, and younger people coming into the profession, they're not signing up to the old ways of working. I speak to lots of junior lawyers. Many of them don't want to be partners in law firms. So there's a succession issue brewing here. So I think getting with it for all those reasons to help the sustainability and profitability of your firm and making it a great place to work is why you ought to be taking mental health seriously as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a question for Sarah. One of the interesting things, one of the reasons we started Be Kind, We Care was because we saw that there was a major breakdown between estate agents, lenders, conveyancers with each other in communication. People were getting quite nasty. It's a real time of high stress, and it's a high pressure environment at the moment. It is normally, especially now. What do you think can be done to kind of improve that sometimes fraught relationship in between estate agents and conveyancers? How can we help each other when we're all under so much pressure?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had the silver bullet to that. I really do. But I can certainly give it a go. And I just want to say what Angus and Elizabeth have just said there, I absolutely agree with. You know, this is about not just us now, it's about the future and the future of our industries, both separately and together. And to answer your question, Georgia, I always start with, when I was an estate agent, and not now, but when I was, I loved the conveyancing firm we worked with. We had a fantastic relationship, and that started because we set out, both of us, very clearly our expectations of each other. So I think there's, you know, we've got all this prop tech and law tech, and don't get me wrong, I'm on the right side of 40, I think, to be technically native or whatever the word is. You know, and I'm a great believer in the adoption of technology. But in a nutshell, having those conversations about setting our expectations out clearly from both sides when we enter into a relationship with either a conveyancing partner as an estate agent or an estate agent if you're a conveyancer, actually setting that out clearly. Likewise, if this is a new person that you've never dealt with before, just take a few minutes to say, I want to talk about how we're going to make this work, and then run it through. Because otherwise, I know, right, I've been at the coalface in not too distant past, and estate agents are panicking because they've got customers ringing them saying, what's going on with my sale? And so they're ringing the lawyers saying, you know, give me an update, give me an update. And the lawyer's thinking, oh Christ, I've got all these blooming files to get through. Leave me alone. If you just left me alone, I'd get them work done. I get it. Right? That's in its most simplistic form, but that is kind of what's happening. And nobody's at fault there, right? Agents trying to do their job, conveyancers are trying to do their job really well. But because we haven't set out clear communication strategy at the beginning of the relationship, it then all just goes, you know, to pot really as we get further down the line. This is a highly emotional time for the consumer. So together, if we can work to make it less emotional by being clearer across the board to the consumer, to the agent, to the lender, to the conveyancer, actually, we might find out that we reduce our stress levels and we get where we all want to be, which is to the move, right? That's what we all want.
Same end goal. I think that's very true, and I think it's the same with clients, isn't it? I think sometimes setting out your expectations, both sides, for communication at the start is just absolutely key in managing that stress moving forward.
It sounds, let's be honest. Sorry to sort of keep going, but that's all very romantic. Easy. Communicate better, but actually, service level agreements are a bit, we've all read and entered into them before, but a clear, 3 or 4 points of your expectations of updates and when you're going to be in touch, it can really help. I'll leave you with this. The firm we worked with, every Thursday, they gave us we had a Google sheet that we shared, and they just updated it on there of where they were at with each sale. Then I didn't have to bother them. I knew it was coming. We all knew, and then I did my vendor contacts, happy days. Of course, I rang them occasionally if it was urgent, but just simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. Simple stuff can work.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah. I think we've got time for one more question. We have run over, but we've got quite an interesting question from Stitch Acumen. It says, do you think that there are ways for technology to help a company encourage employees to look after their mental health when burnout is becoming more common? So I don't know whether Hannah and Angus, you want to take this one. Are you seeing ways that technology can actually help this problem?
Well, it's interesting. I've been talking about this for the last week with people. It's about getting people off the phones. And it's funny, to follow on from Sarah's point. I'm speaking to so many people who say, I can't get any work done in the day because I'm on the phone all day. So I'm having to work then in the evening or the weekend. That's not on. That cannot keep going on, because, I talk about energy and things like that with people too. If you keep switching from taking a phone call to going back to a document, you've lost 10-15 minutes there just by keep switching. So you're losing time all day long, and people have clearly got a lot on. So I've actually been looking at and talking to people about what they're doing about phones and how they can use some technology. So what I've done for years with my clients is my voicemail clearly says, you will get me more urgently. If you need me urgently, email me. Because if I'm in meetings or doing whatever, I will see emails before I'll see a phone call. Now, that's just what I do in my business. But there's other technology out there where when you get a phone call, they can get a text message response, and then you can get them on that, for example. Now, obviously, everybody's different and how they'll deal with things differently. But I know a friend of mine who runs a conveyancing firm, he's gone much more down the tech route, because we've got to stop fee earners from having to do this admin if they're going to get through their cases. And that's where I think we do need more tech, and to use tech more, so that, just like Sarah said, those updates can still be there. People can still stay on track. It doesn't need to be complicated tech, just like she shared. A Google Drive. Oh, there's more fancy things too if you want. Doesn't need to be expensive, doesn't need to be fancy. But how can you get that communication bit going on without people having to be on the phone all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think also, Angus, from your point of view, I mean, as a psychologist, I imagine you've had to switch to remote therapy sessions and things like that over the past year. You probably had to adapt the way that you work. I'm not sure how you worked before COVID, but I know that a lot of psychologists have. Is that a way forward as well, potentially, for people within the workplace, kind of sessions that are online, rather than having anyone come into the office?
Yeah, I work face-to-face in a consulting room with people one-to-one before COVID, and ever since COVID I've been working on Zoom or over the telephone. So I just in answer to the previous question, I think tech, if I knew of tech that could solve stress, I'd be the next Silicon Valley millionaire, billionaire, trillionaire. I mean, magic bullets and all that. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I've found is, so I've been working with people who've been in different parts of the country. One guy at the moment working away from home, and the therapy wouldn't have happened, certainly with a number of clients, if it hadn't been for Zoom or the telephone. So I think in terms of psychotherapy, it will be a mixture, and I guess virtually all workplaces, the way ahead will be a mixture of the old ways of working and the new ways of working that we've had to develop and that have developed around us over the last 12 months or so, which I think is a good thing, because it means more potential access for people to talk and share, and lots of downsides, lots of remoteness, lots of overlaps with home and work, and we don't have the buffers of the commute into work and just those natural breaks in the day. So yeah, it's all about managing it and managing it well. And that's down to number one. And I see somebody's putting their hand up, so go for it.
Sorry, Angus, I didn't want to interrupt, but I just wanted to come back to the point, Georgia, about, are there any technologies that can help with specifically, well-being in the workplace? And I don't know how far along it is, but I do know that it's coming, that Mental Health First Aid England are actually developing an app. The idea being that it will ask you a series of questions and then it will signpost you to certain resources should you need them. Now, relatively basic again, but just having maybe some of those things and encouraging teams to actually use that sort of technology. So they're not having to do it in a one-to-one. By the way, absolutely, there's a place for one-to-one. I know that. Sorry, Angus, not trying to do you out of a job. But actually, in the first instance, it's encouraging people to just confidentially within the remit, the safety of their phone, as it were, to just sort of check on their own self. But it comes back to what Elizabeth was speaking so eloquently about in terms of, the decision makers, the senior people within these businesses have got to encourage this whole of business approach to this. It's okay if you need to go and have 5 minutes to sort of check on your well-being. It's okay to, and actually communicating it to your team members. This is where you can get these things. They're really good. Use them, and making it part of it, not just here's another file, here's another file.
Sure. I was just going to add to that on using tech to support mental health and well-being, is I think we need, what we've learned from COVID is one size does not fit all. And we need a menu of ways that people can find support. So at LawCare, we run a web chat service on a Wednesday. At the moment, we only run it 1 day a week because we don't have the manpower, people power to do it every day. But we know if we expanded that, we would. It's growing already. It's doubled in the last year as a channel that people want. And as there are lots of Mental Health First Aid England, as you already heard, but there's things like Calm and Headspace apps, which people find really helpful. So in the days when you are commuting and you're sitting on a train or a bus, you can log into something like that and help you. But I think it's about having tech as a support, as a menu of things, and people need different things. But I would always advocate that ultimately, speaking to another person, be it online or in person, is really probably one of the most empowering ways to help people move forward with things that are concerning them.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you both said, sorry, Angus, go on.
I was just going to say on the back of what Sarah and Elizabeth have just said about Mental Health First Aid England, anything that comes out of that organisation, I think, is worthy of a look. I'm not here, I'm not involved with them, but check out the website, it's brilliant. And business owners, get yourself trained up, get people in the workforce trained up to be mental health first aiders. That is absolutely, it's a fantastic organisation, really good. If anybody wants any leads on that, I've got some contacts. I know trainers, so I'm happy to point people in a direction, but it's a brilliant organization. They've got so many resources.
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of this and the reason we started Be Kind, We Care is highlighting actually what is already available, what is out there, what is brilliant for people to use, and making sure that people find it. Well, thank you so much to all of you. It's been a really, really valuable session. I'll leave you with a comment from somebody who said that I don't have any questions, but just want to say thank you to all the speakers. This session has made me realise certain traits which I started to show. So I think it's been a really, really valuable takeaway for a lot of people on this this webinar. And thank you all so much for joining. As I said, it is recorded, so we will be putting it up on the website. So if people want to refer back to it, it's going to be there for everyone to take a look at. And I'll also be handing around the handouts and presentations as well. But thank you to all of our attendees for joining, and to all of our wonderful speakers as well. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.